On today's show, how to hold show pigs. So let's go.
To the Front, the show that answers questions for stock show families. Presented by TTF Nutrition, livestock supplements that get you to the front.
Welcome to the front. I'm Tony Morris, joined as always by the lovely and talented Thomas Gross. Thomas, tell us all about your day.
Well, we've had a pretty good day. We've been at a little goat showmanship clinic for the day, and so that was an adventure for us. It's I guess that's our secondary species, and we're just doing everything we can to learn more about it. So that's where we've spent our day. How about you, good sir? What are you doing today?
Well, show cattle people will understand that we are on day, 62, I believe, of putting cattle in the cooler, which means every day for us is a carbon copy of the day before. At 6 a.m., you get up, you drag those things in, you blow them out, you rinse them, you work hair, you blow them again, you wait around till noon, and then you ice bath them, and you rinse and repeat. So we've been doing that, as always, and we're also trying something that probably is silly. We've got a couple of these things on the pig side that are hairless. So at noon, we also walk the pigs into the cooler and ice bath them. And I don't know if it's going to work or not. I do know that on the hot days, they enjoy it. And on the not hot days, they act a lot like Poland show pigs that hate cold water. So it's our new adventure. I'll let you know how the results are. But that is our day. We're also getting ready to leave. We're leaving tomorrow for Springfield for the Team Purebred show. So I'm trying to load the trailer and pack a bag and do all that stuff as well. So busy times around the Morris Ranch.
Excellent. Well, you make that show cow thing sound like so much fun. I can't wait to jump in myself, I guess.
It's amazing the numbers are going down.
Well, I don't have any idea why. I think I could have 75 pigs on feed for that amount of work, but that's just maybe me.
Our neighbors, the Bookers, who we're pretty good, who we're tight with, and Pam and my wife are really tight. And Pam sends my wife a text message every day, and she named it the 100 Days of Insanity or something. And it's basically once you start those things in the cooler, you cannot stop. And so for 100 days, you're just going to commit yourself to this, and it absolutely will drive you crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, one more thing I wanted to touch on as we get rolling here, because we're a nutrition podcast. So I found something super nutritious that's also delicious the other day, and we've had nerd clusters. These are juicy nerd clusters here as well, and these juicy nerd clusters, as I have a small hand reaching over here, my son stopped by. He thinks he's going to get into these nerd clusters, I think, so I'm going to go ahead and lose those. You go ahead and head on upstairs, buddy. Those juicy nerd clusters, you remember Gushers from before, and so those Gushers are basically like that, just coated in nerds. It's pretty incredible.
Interesting. I am a big fan of the gummy nerd clusters. My son and I went out to Omaha for the College World Series, and on the way out and on the way back, I ate an entire bag of the gummy nerd clusters. So if they've got something with juice inside, I'm probably going to give that a go. But speaking of holding, which I didn't when I was eating nerd clusters, let's talk about holding show pigs.
Excellent. So I think it's a really big topic, how do we hold show pigs? And it's not a one-size-fits-all, but let's break it down into quite a few smaller pieces here. And so I think, we've got a series of 5 or 6 questions that we've received over the last several months that kind of all relate to holding show pigs. And so let's try to walk through that in kind of a logical fashion. So I guess the first question that we have is, we've heard the terms hold, and I've heard the term slow roll. Tony, how would you think about those individually?
So for me, and we've got a lot of pigs that are on a slow roll, right? To me, that means I'm going to just kind of moderate their growth throughout the feeding period. So I'm going to do that with how I feed them, by how much I feed them, and I'm just going to really be very measured in how much I allow them to gain every day, really from the time I get them started all the way through until maybe at the end I can turn them loose. So I would call that a slow roll. And we've got several of them like that. I myself love to buy these things with a lot of stuff. And when you buy them with a lot of stuff, I think you need to kind of plan on feeding them slow and easy. because you can't just max those things out. So when you have those real stout ones, those ones maybe a little questionable on skeleton, those sort of things, I think slow roll is a great way to just let them go easy, and you typically can kind of keep yourself from making trouble that way. Holding, in my mind, is where we kind of feed them normal, if you will, and then we get to a point in time where we know, hey, we've got to go a period of time where we don't gain weight, or we gain very, very little weight, and we're going to do that on a condensed calendar, but it's going to be pretty aggressive when we do it. And we've got some that are doing that, right? So it's, we still got 30, 40 days till our county fair, and we got a bear weighing 230, right? And he just can't keep on at the pace he's going, so he's going to get 3 weeks of holding a crash diet. That's kind of my thoughts between them.
Yeah, I would say most show pigs today probably need some amount of slow roll in their life, right? That we're going to let their skeleton develop. We're going to let kind of everything catch up to the muscle. And I think growing them slow, whether you like it or not, is probably the way of the show world right now. The holding is a little different thing. We're in a bad spot on weight, and now we need to hold. And I think there's sometimes a fine line where you think slow rolling's going to be okay, and then we're going to need to hold. But that's kind of the difference between those two. So I think one of the questions that we've seen a bunch is, when should we start holding? And when do you know you're in trouble, and how do we work through that?
Well, to me that's a little bit difficult. You kind of need to have a plan as soon as you know you're going to have problems, and you can't do that unless those things are getting on a set of scales routinely, right? If you are trusting your eyeball or somebody else's eyeball to tell you if you're on track from a weight standpoint, I think you're setting yourself up for a little bit of a disaster. So, in my opinion, like, those things got to get weighed. They got to get weighed routinely. Like, we weigh every week at the same time. We're like Sunday midday, where they're kind of on an empty stomach, and we weigh like that, and we can kind of begin to get a track and an idea of how much they're gaining versus what we're feeding them, and say, okay, we are going to be in trouble with this one. And once we find that out, then depending on when you're trying to get them ready to show and what you want to do, I think it's better to do it sooner rather than later. If you're going to have to hold one, you certainly do not want to, if you can ever avoid it, be holding one right up until the day before you show them, right? I mean, that's a good way to be disappointed with results in my mind. So if you find out you got a problem and you got to shut them down, I think the best time to do it is as soon as you find out you got a problem. It's my thought. You got a different thought?
Do your work early is kind of the way that I've always thought about that if we're going to hold, let's get it early. Now, I would say that's not when they're 75 pounds, right? I think, I like them to get over 100, 125 pounds before I start kind of slowing them down. And I probably won't go into a holding pattern until they're 150 to 175 pounds is probably the way I like to think about it. But you're exactly right. Start getting your average daily gain. Let's do a little bit of math. How many days till my show? At that current average daily gain, where's that going to put me, right? And am I in trouble or not? Have a conversation with your breeder as well. What should you expect out of those genetics? And there's a wide range of rates of gain in these different sow lines and different boar lines. And so there's some of these things that wouldn't surprise me if they're going to, even if they're eating well, they're going to gain 0.8 to 1.1 or 1.2 pounds a day. There's others of these crossbreds out there that'll still do 1 3/4 to 2 pounds a day, right? And some of these purebreds, I think if we let them really get after it, they might do 2 pounds plus a day of average daily gain, right? And so have a conversation with your breeder. What should we expect out of these? Let's do a little bit of math. Do your work early.
The old adage, if you will, that I read in textbooks in the mid-90s was around 3 pounds of intake would average around a pound of gain. Now, I don't think that holds true. It certainly doesn't hold true on every single pig, right? But if you kind of think about, I'm trying to shove 5 or 6 pounds in some of these things if we let them have their druthers, well, you should expect, upwards of, 1 3/4 to close to 2 pounds of gain most of the time. I do think, especially, and I see it more on the crossbreds than I do the purebreds anymore, but I think the way we've bred crossbred pigs, they all seem to go through a bit of a natural slowdown period. I don't know. They're just moderate animals with great big limbs, and they just don't always seem to gain hard, especially through the hot summer months. And so knowing that ahead of time, sometimes you're not in as bad a shape as you think you are, but it's really important you talk to the people that raised them and find out what the experience has been like with other ones out of that sow line or bred the same way.
So when we start to think about holding, and you and I have talked about this a lot before, that you want to enjoy walking out to the barn, right? So I should say it's easy in some ways to say I can get them to quit growing by giving them zero feed, right? Or a quarter of a pound of feed, but they're going to probably fall apart at that point in time, lose all their shape, lose all their fat, lose all their spread that they have. So instead of saying, we're okay throwing everything away, what can you feed in order to hold these things? Or what are you kind of thinking about from a nutrient and ingredient standpoint?
To me, the nutrients that are going to be really important when you start thinking about holding one are going to be fat and fiber and protein and lysine, right? And that's kind of silly because that's really important all the time, and we think about it all the time. But if you think about what each one of those things do for an animal, trying to maximize how much of that we're allowing them to have based on the amount of gain we can get from them, I think really is the key to holding one. And this is one of those things we said in earlier podcasts, like caller said, hey, we really want to be better at feeding. Well, I think everybody I know would like to be better at holding pigs, right? I mean, I don't know anybody that says I'm great at it. It's easy for me, right? This is tough. But knowing what those nutrients do, right? And so as you go through them real quick, fiber, for instance, just think about when you eat fiber, that's going to help keep those things full. It's going to keep them more satiated or satisfied with how much gut fill they have. And then you'll physically see more fill when you allow them to have more fiber, right? So oats are a decent source of fiber. Soy hulls are a great source of fiber that are in a lot of pig diets. And so utilizing fiber to keep those things full, they'll yell at you a heck of a lot less, and then keep them just with the right kind of rib shape is really important. Fat is a lot of that bloom that you loved before you had to hold them, right? A lot of that is just from fat. So maintaining enough fat in their diet that they don't lose too much body fat is really important as well if you can do it. And it's hard because fat is a huge energy source, and energy when allowing them to digest it normally is going to cause weight gain. So managing how much fat they're allowed to have versus how much weight gain you get is really important. And then protein and lysine are the building blocks of muscle. And so if you want to see one still have some shape, or if you're hoping to still show them during a holding phase, you need to kind of maximize what you can do with protein and lysine, or else those pigs are just going to lose all their shape and get really, really flat. So, I mean, the balance of how all those things can work is really important. But knowing those four nutrients, I think, is a huge, huge deal.
One of the things that I think about is like, what should we see and what shouldn't we see? And I know for me, if I'm holding one, I'm probably giving up on jackpotting them, right? And I'm just going to go ahead and write that off, because if I'm going to go to a jackpot, I'm going to want to get them full and get them looking right. I don't want to show up to a jackpot and say, you're not getting any feed today. You're going to go ahead and I'm okay placing seventh, in the class today. So I'm giving up the idea of jackpotting them. And also when I like to keep a little bit of muscle in them, and I'm probably okay if we slowly burn some fat off, right? And so I understand that as that pig gets later in its life cycle, it's going to deposit fat easier. Fat's probably easier to get back in my mind than muscle long term as I kind of think about it. But we want to keep some fat in the diet. But I'm okay when I start holding that pig if I see them lose a little bit of fat and get a little bit skinnier. How about you? When would you say, like, yep, I'm okay with them looking like that?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on the pig, right? But I agree with you. I think they quite naturally are going to lose some body condition when they're in a holding. If I was to put myself in a hold, I would hope to lose body condition, right? And depending on what I eat alongside that, I may or may not lose muscle. So I'm always okay with them losing some body condition. You're also not going to see as much as much oomph and as much body shape as what you normally do, because they're not going to be eating as much. So if they get a little flatter, if they get a little more off in their look that way, I think that's kind of natural as well.
And as you're going through the holding process, continue that weighing them, right? Continue to keep an eye on them. Continue to make sure that we're doing the right things. What are the things that we maybe don't want to see when we're holding a pig, right? When would you say, hey, we decided to hold this pig, we're now in trouble. We've either got to turn the gas back on or find a new target show that's a whole lot closer. When do you think you're in trouble?
So, and it doesn't happen as much now, but those of you guys who fed pigs in the early 2000s or back in the 90s, we used to talk all the time about their chine bone showing. And that's right up in between their blade. It's one of the first vertebrae in their back that has a really long process that sticks up. And man, when they started showing chine, when you started seeing that rise up between their blades, it told me we lost muscle shape, we lost too much fat. And you don't hardly get them to do that anymore, but you still see that same, man, when they have just lost everything, particularly right in behind their shoulder. I feel like, man, maybe holding him is just not going to work. Maybe we adjust our target, right? We find a different spot on the calendar to get going.
There's another show about every month, right? So maybe we go to one a month earlier.
That's exactly right. Our good friends of ours, that run Matthews, they were talking about, we're a little more mature, and very early on they decided, hey, State Fair's not for us. You're going to go all out for Expo, right, or for NJSS because it's here in Indy. So, making those kind of decisions is something you have to do. It's tough if you're going to your county fair and, you want to show at your county fair, and so you got to figure that out. But sometimes you got to find a new spot. But, man, when I see those things and they start to get flat in their top and they start to almost kind of show their chine and they lose that bloom up high to the point you don't think it's coming back, that's when I think we're in a big problem.
I always read chest and knee for me, right? And maybe I care about that more than some other people sometimes that sort shows. But I'll tell you, like, if I'm sitting on one and they're good chested to start with, when that chest and knee start to collapse and they start to get narrow coming right to me in their chest floor, that's when I probably start to worry a little bit, because in my mind, that doesn't just mean we've lost fat. We're starting to lose some real muscle that holds skeletons open at that point in time. And once we start losing some of that muscle, that's when I start to get a little bit worried. And that's when I say we either need to fire this one up. And you know what? I've fired them up for a week before and then gone back to a slow roll. Or, like we said earlier, find an earlier show. And so that's kind of one of the important things to think about, or one of the important indicators for me is kind of that chest floor.
Yeah, and that skeleton is, in terms of width, right, the skeleton's fairly pliable pretty late into life, right? And they talk about calcification of things. And, man, these things are still young enough, even if they're 7-8 months old, they're still pretty pliable in terms of how their ribs attached up high in their spine. And some of that you see is just, man, when you limit that and they begin to just get less body fill, that body shape just starts to go away. And, man, so long as you keep some fiber in their diet and, kind of make them feel satiated and just physically fill up, man, you usually can keep them from falling totally apart.
So I guess the other side of that is, okay, how do we know when we held too long? Great. There's some indicators there, and sometimes, unfortunately, you don't know when you held too long until it's too late, right? And sometimes you don't know until you've fired them back up and you try to get back after it. So when would you say we've held long enough, it's now go time?
Yeah. I mean, if you're just looking at the scales, and you can do a basic math equation of here's how many days and here's what I think they're going to gain, you can do a little bit of an equation and get close. One thing that we don't talk about a lot in hogs, but it happens, is the idea of compensatory gains, right? And it happens with all livestock, and we talk about it a ton in cattle when they go through this stocker phase. But when they're at a time when we're limiting their growth and they're still a youthful animal, when they have the opportunity, they will try to make up all of that growth just naturally. It's kind of a rarity that happens in livestock, but, man, it happens. And pigs do it. We talk about it a ton in cattle, and commercial cattle bank on that. But you're going to get more growth than you ever had before when you finally turn them loose. Now, for how long? Sorry, I got a fly on my camera. For how long that lasts kind of depends on how long you held them and how hard you're going after it again. But, man, you got to be prepared for that. So, the other thing is if you keep them in decent shape, pigs bounce back fast, right? I mean, one of the biggest problems I have is I typically don't hold long enough. I get 3 or 4 weeks out from a show, and I get real jittery about how bad I think these things look. And, man, I'm so worried, and people are going to make fun of me, and we're going to get our butts kicked and all those things. And so then I just can't help myself, and I start feeding. And I always start too early. So if you got 10 days to 2 weeks, you can get about 99% of them back. And the ones that don't come back in that time frame, they might not have been coming back anyway, right, in terms of the look you need. So, my advice to you is do the math, right? Let's make sure we got time. Let's prepare for the fact they're going to gain more than they ever have before, and let's plan for that. And let's realize we're going to get everything we need back in 10 days, maybe 2 weeks tops, and there's not a reason to start going before that.
Yeah. That compensatory gain is, I'd say, use that to your advantage sometimes, right? And so the last one that I remember holding was a red bear that we were going to show in the fall, and we were going to go out to Eastern Regional with him. And he wanted to grow on air, it felt like, so we shut him down pretty hard. And about 4 days before it was time to load up for that show, and we load up about 4 days before it was time, we get out there 4 days and then the bear show. So we had about 8 days before he hit the show ring is when I started to feed him. And, that compensatory gain hit hard, but it also added a lot of freshness. He put on 35, 40 pounds in those 8 days. We fed him hard, but I gave myself 40 pounds, and I said, let's see if we can get all on him in 8 days. Muscle came back. Chubb came back because he put on 40 pounds in 8 days, and they're not going to metabolize all of that into muscle. Some of that's going to go to fat as well. And so using that compensatory gain, knowing that we can pick up a lot of steam in a hurry, can work to your advantage to freshen them up, depending on the genetics. Being a red bear, I kind of figured he'd flesh pretty easily. If it's one of these harder-bodied crossbreds, you might give yourself more than 8 days. But just knowing your genetics, having a relationship with that breeder allows you to kind of know when it's time to turn them back on, and then be prepared for that compensatory gain. Don't get caught flat-footed. I think if we're going into this holding phase thinking this pig's gaining 1.75 pounds a day, we're in trouble, and we limited them back. Don't think when you turn it on it's going to be back at 1.75 pounds a day. It might be at 2 to 2.5 pounds a day for a week or two. So if we do our math and we say we've got 3 weeks left, we can gain 1.75, time to turn him on. It's probably still time to wait a little bit more. But do your math. Be prepared for a little bit extra oomph, I guess, to use a technical term, as you start feeding them.
Yeah, because you're going to get it. You are going to get more than you ever had before. But, yeah, my favorite holding story is our first good crossbred bear that we won his class at Expo, and then we decided we wouldn't take him to the state fair. And then after he wins our county fair, then we decide, we got 2 weeks. I bet we can make it. And we tried to sit on him. We show up at state fair and declare him the heaviest he could be. The day before he was going to show, he was 15 pounds over, and he hadn't eaten 3 days. And we decided that morning, you and I made a deal, whoever gets here first, weigh him, and if he's not going to make it, just feed him. And you beat me to the punch, and he was still 10 pounds over, and that thing ate 7 buckets of feed. And he goes into the heaviest crossbred class. Kelton Mace's judging. He sends my son to the scales, and as my son drove him on his last lap of his favorite pig ever, he just said, Kelton, thanks for the opportunity. I probably am not coming back. And put him on the scales, and away he went. And we weighed out by a slim margin of 38 pounds. So
favorite was when Jarrett asked for a reweigh, and the guy running the scales was not as amused as you and I were about that. Jarrett just goes, do we think we could circle him and reweigh him? And the guy just opens the out gate and said, no can do, son.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to poop 38 pounds.
I thought there were some extra shavings under the scales that maybe needed to be cleaned out is all I was asking for there. But
that's my favorite story.
It wasn't a successful hold, I guess, right?
It wasn't, yeah. Those make the best stories, right? So if you try and you mess up, hey, you'll have something funny to laugh about, just like us and old Javi.
And that's one of those, we're doing this to have fun with the kids. We're going to try to be successful. And if you're not, let's have fun at the pig show. And I'll tell you what, you and I had a lot of fun because we had our deal made. I beat you to the barn, and I'd already dumped a full bucket of, wet soaking s'more fill in his pan. And you looked at me and you said, oh, he looks pretty good today. I said, yeah, because he's already had 9 pounds of feed for the day, Tony. I don't think we're going to make it, right? And so,
and we did not.
Thought we had a chance when you walked in the barn that morning, and I knew we didn't, but it was okay.
Yeah, that just proves the best stories don't always involve a banner. Sometimes they involve asking for a reweigh when you're 38 pounds over.
Got to have fun some days. Excellent. So hopefully that's helpful as we think about holding these show pigs. It's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart, but it can be done with the right amount of nutrition and the right ingredients, the right homework, kind of doing it early. And as Tony kind of alluded to, those key ingredients are really impactful. And hopefully if you guys have any questions about holding or, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking about, feel free to run it by us. Tony and I and BJ and some of our other team members are on Facebook on a regular basis. We try to answer your questions as quickly as we can. We also all have full-time gigs, so we try to get back to you quickly, but maybe it's not always immediate. But, we love to hear from you guys, and we love to be helpful when you have questions. One other thing that was kind of quickly on my mind here, and Tony, you made this post a couple days ago, and a first-year family posted a picture of a pig on Facebook, and the pig was, probably not a modern show pig. And they had asked a question. They just wrote, "How do we know?" And I think it was they didn't even know what to ask. I think is kind of what I got out of that post, and I thought it was really awesome. You posted a response back that basically just reminded us all we were all at the beginning at one point in time. And it's easy to, once you have this stuff figured out, think, well, why doesn't everybody know this? I can't believe you don't know this, and chuckle at it. And I think your comment was, it's easy to poke fun at it, and we often forget that we all started at block zero. And so we all came from somewhere where we knew nothing about this industry at one point in time. If all of us that are really good at this, if my daughter came to me tomorrow and said she wanted to take up tap dancing, I would know nothing about tap dancing, and I'm sure my questions to tap dancing experts would seem really kind of off the wall. So I think we need to all as an industry do a better job of bringing our friends along and trying to help them learn. And so if people want to learn how to do this better, we should welcome them with open arms. And I think, having more people at the pig show is fun. It's really easy to run off people that aren't having a good time. So let's be more inclusive. Let's have more people at the stock show. Let's have a better time. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe on the podcast. Send us your questions. Let us know how we can be helpful to you. We really are here to try to be as helpful as we can.
To the Front has been brought to you by TTF Nutrition. Livestock supplements that get you to the front.